Let's turn our attention right now to, well, over-diagnosis of mental health problems. It's something we've spoken about on the show many, many times. Philip Ingram still with me. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. And as we discussed a little bit earlier in the show, you're someone you've spoken very openly. You had depression. You suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder after serving in war. I think a lot of people will understand why these are very serious issues. You need to get the mental health treatment that you need, and you need it quickly. And that we should be helping people in your scenario, especially those who've gone through horrific conflict that has seen this. But how do you feel about the idea? I mean, so many young people now looking at £16 billion a year support services for children and young people every year now for mental health conditions. I mean, this is unsustainable, isn't it?
Completely unsustainable, and we're applying too many labels that we're putting under a mental health banner to too many different supposed conditions that are coming through. When mental health is like physical health, there's an issue that's there. You identify what the causes are of it, you come up with a treatment plan, and you can either treat it successfully so the individual learns how to deal with it, or you can cure it. Yeah. If you're putting a permanent label on people, then
don't think this is helpful.
It's not helpful.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about this with Professor Karol Sikora right now. He's medical director of Rutherford Cancer Centres and joins us. Very, very good afternoon to you, Karol.
Good afternoon, Julia.
It's very interesting. I mean, I first got to know you during lockdown when you were one of the very few voices in the early weeks speaking out about the shutting down of medical care for cancer cases while the NHS was treating COVID cases and ignoring all the far younger people with far many more years of their life who were being completely untreated for cancer. You're also one of the few people speaking out very early on about the dangers for young people of being locked down, missing out on university, missing out on school. And I think we're seeing an awful lot of that play out now, aren't we?
I think we are. The problem with mental health, it's very difficult to measure. Psychiatry as a specialty is one of the most challenging to do because there are very few measurements. In cancer, which is my specialty, you measure the tumours either getting bigger, smaller, or disappearing, and you hope the latter. In heart disease,
you can know if a cure works because someone's either living or they're not living.
Exactly. So, medicine is an exact science for most disciplines, but when it comes to the mind, it's much more challenging. Yeah. And it's a story between the patient and the health professional. You have to come to a conclusion. The other problem is people love diagnostic labels. We overdiagnose things. We overdiagnose ADHD, for example. I'm sure we do, because there's no meadment for it.
Well, wait a minute. We're told we've underdiagnosed it. One of the main groups of people who are now getting diagnosed for it are older women, adult women, saying they've been underdiagnosed. But we're getting to the point where so many people are now being diagnosed with ADHD. It's just a normal spectrum of human behaviour now, isn't it?
It is. And this word spectrum is exactly right for psychiatric disorders. They're not really disorders. All of us get depressed now and again. I'm sure you do. The system's not working, that's raining outside, you've got other things to do.
But I would use the word down, like, I'm a bit tired, I'm having a down day. I wouldn't use the word depressed.
No. You're right, but some people would. And then the other spectrum, when people are morbidly depressed, and I've seen people that are really ill with depression, and that's one end. But there's everything in between on the spectrum. And the treatments for the very severe mentally ill patients are one thing, and we have those, and we're quite good at it in the UK compared to many other countries. But when it comes to overdiagnosis, especially for disease, there's not much you can do. There's really not much you can do. There may be some pills.
But that's it. A lot of it is medicalising. A lot of it is putting labels on. A lot of people are saying they're looking for an explanation of why they are how they are. But again, seeing it as a problem as opposed to, yes, you might be a bit more hyperactive than other people, or you might have a lower attention threshold. But you can have totally normal children, one of whom can sit and read a book happily for 2 hours, and one of whom can't manage more than 5 minutes. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. They're just on that spectrum. But there is such an urge now. There are an awful lot of people who are, let's face it, swinging the lead on the benefits, who they know they can claim extra benefits if their child is diagnosed with things like ADHD. There are a lot of very loving parents who desperately need their children. They really struggle to get their children I used to use the phrase statemented. It's a different form now, to get them the extra help they need with reading and writing. A lot of that, again, failure of teaching, and they're not actually teaching the right way. But there's also a lot, and I've seen a lot of it, people, middle-class parents who are just basically cheating and getting their kids extra attention, extra learning and extra exam time. And a lot of it is excuse-making. Because I know a doctor who said to me that they had repeatedly had parents saying, well, I think my kid's got ADHD, I think my kid's got this or that problem. And what they said was, can you write a food diary and a sleep diary and things like that? I want to have an idea. You know, you're giving your kid a packet of biscuits at 4 o'clock, you know, and a fizzy drink at 10 p.m. The kid's playing on a phone, you know, not getting any sleep. And then you're wondering why your kid doesn't sleep or eat or live a routine life. I think so much of this would be resolved if people weren't sitting around on their phones. They were out in the fresh air, being physically active. They were eating a healthy, low sugar diet and getting enough sleep. I don't think even 10% of the people who claim to have ADHD actually have it. But I'm not a medical expert.
No, but you're right. I mean, you're saying all the right thing. My daughter's a school teacher, and she says exactly what you're saying. It's very difficult. It's very challenging, especially in middle-class areas where there are selection tests for grammar schools and so on, where people say they want an excuse to know why their kid's not doing well in the exam. The reason the kid's not doing well in the exam, they're not very bright, probably. That's all it is.
Well, they're perfectly average.
Exactly, but there's lots of jobs you can do if you're not perfectly bright, you know. You don't have to be a radio producer, for example, a TV producer.
They're all geniuses.
But there are lots of good jobs, and some kids do extremely well. And you look at the spectrum of people in top places, not all of them were the brains of Britain.
Exactly. But what's really interesting is the urge that parents have to put a label on the child. I remember meeting people who they told me, oh, my kid's got dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dyslexia, everything. But she was, again, a perfectly average kid. And occasionally was a little bit clumsy. Well, I'm clumsy, but I haven't got dyspraxia. I'm just a bit clumsy in the way that there's some people who are just athletic and brilliantly agile, and some people who aren't. But we've now put a label on as a problem on basically 50% of the population. It's mad.
And, you know, it's spawned a whole professional interface.
Oh, hasn't it just? Yeah.
Not just psychiatry, but life coaching, for example. What is that about? Where does that come from? To try and make you a better person, more effective in your job. Voice coaching, as we've heard from Keir Starmer. I mean, for goodness sake, where is it all leading to?
Isn't there an issue, though? Look, it's not in your interest. You can't, you know, and the Hippocratic Oath, you can't diagnose someone with cancer who hasn't got cancer or something. Yeah, but there is an issue in the mental health world, and a lot of people know psychologists as opposed to psychiatrists. But even so, from my understanding, from people I know in this field, actually, you go to the specialist in bipolar or ADHD or autism, and you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to get that diagnosis. There is an incentive for everyone involved for that to happen, as opposed to for people to say, well, no. You know, and again, like, you know, we talk about, you know, what was going on with the madness at the Tavistock Clinic and they have affirmation of children saying they were trans. You know, if you work at a clinic for trans kids, you're going to affirm it. There's no incentive for people to say, no, I don't think that is the issue. I think what you need is a bit more of a healthier lifestyle, some routine and a little less introspection, a little bit more, you know, do some sport, maybe do some charity work, and maybe you might feel better about yourself.
I think exercise is one of the key things.
Absolutely.
It's certainly valuable for depression. It doesn't have to be running marathons. No. It can be gentle exercise, walking, running, whatever you like to do. Exercise and healthy diet and a good body mass index, in other words, staying reasonably slim. Yeah. These are the sorts of things you want. And then your lifestyle will follow you.
And then we can have the resources to give the help that is really needed by adults and children who really do have mental health issues, who we really want to be able to help.
Yeah, and doctors are actually poorly trained in mental health. I mean, I was appallingly trained, but that was a long time ago. It's a bit better now. But my experience of mental health was subduing violent schizophrenics in Oxford Street with tranquilizer darts, basically, with the police. And that is not a good introduction to modern psychiatry.
No,
but a lot of us have that experience. And I think things have changed, and there are all sorts of edges where you have mental illness and where you have normality, and the boundary is blurred. It's blurred at different times of the day for some people. Yeah. So I think we have to be very careful. And of course, as we've started off saying, it's costing an enormous amount of money.
16 billion quid. I mean, it's great. And again, even if that, some of those resources were able to be completely focused on the people who really need it, we could probably give them the help that they really do need. And time and again, we know about people, you know, young people who commit suicide because they haven't had the mental health care that they need, but because, again, people are kind of dealing with all the other people. Can I run another story by you? This is a woman, I'm not going to name her, but she's an IT executive. She was working at Gemini. It's a global consultancy firm. She was on her probation period, so she hadn't even been, formally, they still had the option for basically saying you're not up for the job. She started struggling with her tasks. She asked for support. She said, I was trying to avoid taking the legal route because I really liked the company. It was my dream job. I loved it. I knew I could do it. I was trying to manage it in my head, but I realised I couldn't. I was experiencing anxiety. I started losing weight. I went to the doctor. I burst into tears. He said, you're depressed. You have anxiety. Last month, an employment tribunal in London found that the company, Capgemini, failed to provide the recommended neurodiversity awareness training, and this amounted to discrimination against her. And this apparently has big ramifications for businesses across the country. You've got someone who, my reading of this is, she couldn't do the job. It was too overwhelming for her. Didn't suit her personality, shall we say. And so she sued the company, even though she was actually not a permanent employee at that point. This is madness.
It is. Neurodiversity is another one. It's we're all neurodiverse, for goodness sake. Some people cope with it, some people don't cope. There's nothing. It's a new illness that's come out of nowhere. Even the words, they sound clever. They sound as though it means something. It means nothing. It means just variation in brain power.
But it's like people who get stressed out by a tight deadline and people who can't get any work done without a deadline. Well, I'm in the first category. Doesn't mean I've got a problem, or that the people who can't do it have got. It's like someone turning up to do a job as a live radio host and then saying after a few months, oh, it just makes me anxious, I can't do it, but it's your fault.
I know. Physical illness is so much easier to handle, to categorize, to box into different diagnostic boxes, and to measure progress. Mental disease is very difficult in all these counts. I think, as you keep saying, severe mental illness needs to be treated properly, and we need to have a mental health service that can cope with severe mental illness. But bringing it forward to more and more of the population, especially young people, is a crazy thing to do, because it just begets more and more of the same. It's a roller coaster that will absorb more and more funds, more and more time, and consume all sorts of problems. Teachers, the universities, everywhere.
And again, you say, it's a nation. How's that working out for us? I would say pretty darn badly. Professor Karol Sikora, always the voice of reason. Really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for that. Philip Ingram, as someone who's openly talked about, and it's really good. People talk about how, I think ever since I've been a journalist, they've said, we need to talk more about mental health. I am firmly of the view in the last 5-10 years, we need to talk less about mental health. I think we talk about it far too much.
No, we need to talk about it in the right way, and we need to make sure that it comes out in the same way that if you're talking about a physical illness, a cold, you've broken your leg or something else, it becomes that normal part of society. So
nothing to be ashamed of.
Nothing to be ashamed of, and you can turn around and say, I'm suffering from this, I'm suffering that, but there needs to be proper diagnosis. My depression was a medical condition and was dealt with medically, and I got cured for that. My PTSD was a condition that was caused by the circumstances, and I got taught how to live with that and how to deal with it.
That's as opposed to a label and a sort of a get-out clause. Yeah, exactly. Philip Ingram, again, that's why we have him on the show, talking sense, as always.